Hi class, this is 8.7, solving quadratic equations by using square roots. So far we've learned how to factor or solve quadratic equations through factoring. And so today we're going to learn how to do it with square roots, where factoring just isn't an option to use. So one of the things we need to remember is that every positive real number has two square roots, one positive and one negative. Okay, so remember that the reason that works is because I'm taking a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive when I square something. And both of these then, in both of these instances, it would equal 9. So when I take the square root of 9, it could be equal to either 3 or positive 3, or 3 or negative 3. So the way I indicate that is I use this symbol, this plus or minus symbol. So I would say the positive or negative square root of 9 is either positive or negative 3. Okay, and so that just kind of covers our bases then. It could be a positive 3, it could be a negative 3 to equal 9. Okay, so here then what I'm going to do is to undo that squared to solve for x, I'm going to take the square root. So when I do that, I'm left with x. And then my square root of 169 would be either plus or minus 13. So if I go and check that then, if I plug in 13 for x, 13 squared is 169, and that checks out. 169 equals 169, so that one works. Now if I were to do it with negative 13, it would also work. Because remember, I'm going to keep this whole part together, so negative 13 times negative 13 would also equal a positive 169. Okay, now on these kind over here, where I'm going to take the square root here, I'm going to be left with x on this side. If I try to punch in the square root of negative 49 into my calculator, I am going to get an error message. So in these cases, this would be no real solution. And the reason being is that I would, in order to get a negative number, I need to take a positive number times a negative number. And that's not possible when you're squaring something. So in this case, I can't take a negative square root, so I would just have no real solution. Okay, and on this next one then, I'm going to start the same way. Take the square root of both sides. And if you try to punch in the square root of 20 into your calculator, it's going to just give you a decimal. So what you want to do in this case then, be positive or negative. So what you want to do then is take this square root of 20 and simplify it. So you need to think to yourself, okay, what are my factors of 20 that are perfect squares? And hopefully 4 comes to mind. So 4 times 5, same as 20. I'm just rewriting it, but I have a perfect square factor. So my final answer then, plus or minus, remember, bring that down. My final answer then, I would take the square root of 4, which is 2, so he hops outside now, and then the square root of 5 remains under my radical. So there would be my answer for that one. And then you can always check by plugging in either positive or negative 2 times the square root of 5 in for x. Okay, I'm not going to take the time to do that one here, but you can always check that on any of these examples. Okay, so this next one here then, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Square root of x squared is just going to leave me with an x. And then square root of 0 is just 0. And this would be an instance where I don't even need to put my plus or minus sign because 0 is just neutral. It's not positive or negative. Okay, this next one, hopefully you see it before you even try it, but you can't take the square root of a negative number, so this one would be, again, no real solutions. Okay, and then the last one on this page, again, we're going to take the square root of both sides. We're going to have x equals the positive or negative square root of 18. And then, again, if I try to punch in square root of 18 into my calculator, it's going to give me a decimal. So all I can do is just simplify that. So I'm going to rewrite that. What are my perfect square factors of 18? Hopefully 9 comes to mind. So 9 times 2, same as 18. And then I'm going to just finish by taking the square root of 9, which is 3. So he comes outside the radical, and then I'm going to leave my square root of 2 on the inside. So here would be my final answer then. Okay, and so then these next ones, we've got just a couple extra steps we're going to add in, but it's going to be the same process. So here I want to start by subtracting 7. I want to get my x alone. So I'm going to have x squared equals 0. And then I can go from there. I can take the square root of both sides. And so just like that problem on the previous page, x is just going to equal 0. Okay, and then for my next one, I'm going to start by adding 49 to both sides. So I'm going to have 16x squared equals 49. And then next I'm going to want to divide by 16. So over here I'm going to just be left with x squared. And then if you punch in 49 divided by 16 into your calculator, you're going to get a decimal. It doesn't divide evenly. So what I am going to want to do then is I'm just going to leave it as 49 over 16 because both of those are perfect squares. So what I can do then is when I go to take my square root, I can take the square root of this whole thing here then. So I'm going to be left with x equals the square root of 49 over 16. And again, that's positive or negative. And then the final thing I can do then is remember our radical rules, where I can split my square root and do the square root of 49 over the square root of 16. And then I can just simplify from there. So I'll have x equals positive or negative, square root of 49 is 7, square root of 16 is 4. So positive or negative 7 divided by 4. Okay, and then the next one over here, I'm going to start by subtracting 49 from both sides. I'm going to have 100x squared equals negative 49. Divide by 100 again. And this time then, again, that doesn't divide evenly, so I'm going to just leave it as it is. And if you notice, I end up with that negative 49 over there, and so that's not going to work out well. So in this instance, I'm just going to have no real solutions, since I can't take the square root of a negative number, because if I tried to go to my next step, it's not going to work out. Okay, so what I want you to do next then is I want you to try these next 3 on your own, and then you can check with the notes answer key. Remember that this one, I'll give you kind of a clue to start this one. You want to start by taking the square root of both sides. So you're going to be left with just x minus 5, and then the square root of 16 would be plus or minus 4. Okay, and then go ahead and add 5 to both sides. And then what you need to do then is go positive 4 plus 5 gives you a 9, and then a negative 4 plus 5 gives you a 1. So there would be my 2 answers here then. Okay, so go ahead and check yourself on the other 2, pause the video, do these next 2, and then you can press play again and we'll do the final story problems. Alright, so these next ones then, story problems, says Mr. Pirzada is building a retaining wall along one of the sides on her rectangular garden. The garden is twice as long as it is wide. So let's go ahead and draw this first. She said it was a rectangle. And it says the garden is twice as long as it is wide. So if this is how wide it is, or actually let's do it the other way. Draw it so it matches. If it's twice as long as it is wide, it's going to go this way. Okay, so if here's our width, the garden is twice as long as it is wide. So what we can do for the width then is do 2w. Okay, since that one is twice as long as this side would be. So here's all of our dimensions then. So now it says the whole area is 578 square feet. What will the length be of the retaining wall? Okay, so she wants to just build this retaining wall along one of the long sides of her garden. So she just wants to build it right here. But in order to know that, we need to know what W is. So we need to know what the width is. Okay, and we know what the area is. So we know that if we take W times 2W, length times width, that's going to give us our 578. Okay, so if we go ahead and combine these, whoops, we'll have 2w squared equals 578. So then we can go ahead and solve for W from there. So I'm going to divide by 2, and so after I take 578 divided by 2, I'm going to get 289. So I'm going to have W squared equals 289, and then I just need to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to get W equals plus or minus 17. Now in the scheme of our story problem, we would want just the positive one, so we would say that W equals 17. So our length then, 2W, would be 2 times 17, so that would be 34 then. So our final answer, she would need 34 feet for her retaining wall, since she's going to just do one side of it. Okay, last one then. It says a house is on a lot that's shaped like a trapezoid, and they give us the area for a trapezoid here. We probably haven't seen this formula before. The solid lines show the boundaries where X is the width of the front yard. So we're going to find the width of the front yard knowing that the area is 6,000 square feet. So I'm going to plug in 6,000 for my area, and then I'm going to use the formula 1/2 times my height. My height is 2x times my two bases added together. So that's 2x plus x. So let's go ahead and simplify some of this stuff. I'm going to have 1/2 times 2, which is just x, times 2x plus x is 3x. So if I go ahead and multiply those together, then I'm going to get 3x squared over here. So my next move then would be to divide by 3 on both sides. I'm going to get 2,000 over here equals x squared. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And the square root of 2,000, it says to round to the nearest foot. So it would be 45 if I round up. So 45 feet equals x. Okay, and again, we want to just pay attention to the positive one here, since it is a story problem and we're dealing with length. Okay, so remember, if you haven't already, go back and finish these last two really problems. Check your work on the answer key, and then you can get started on your assignment.